A ram. You'll see a photograph of a ram that was ultimately used to breach the door. Other detectives: Miles Cosgrove, Mike Campbell, Tony James, and Sean Hoover. Detective Hankison was a canine officer, meaning he had a dog that was trained to sniff for narcotics, a specifically trained narcotics dog. That dog did not leave the vehicle of the defendant at any time. The protocol is the dog stays in the car until the warrant, until entry is made. The search is in progress. If the dog is needed, then the dog would be retrieved from the vehicle. That did not happen here. The dog never left the car. It was approximately 11:45. Exhibit 14. Let's go to 19. This is another photo of the breezeway, and now you can see apartment 1. You can see the size of the area here is not large. Exhibit 19. This photo taken further back. This is the stairs going up to the other 4 apartments on the second floor, this being 8, 7, 6, and then 5 over here. The sliding glass doors of apartment 4, and due to the stairs, you cannot see the door to apartment 4, but it's right here. This is the sliding glass doors, and you can see the railing going around the little patio. This photo was taken the morning after, so it's daylight. But obviously, when this event occurred, it was pitch dark at midnight. You can see the shattering of the window, the glass door in these patio doors. Those are the shots that the defendant made through these doors that went all the way through into the other apartment 3 here, which mirrors apartment 4. There's a common wall between the two of them. This diagram over to your right is a floor plan of apartment 3. The front door being here, dining, kitchen, bedrooms, and here is the patio that leads out into the back of the building. So the bullets you will hear came from apartment 4, which would be down here. This is the common wall. Came through the sliding door here, through the dining room wall, all the way through out the patio door of this apartment. There were 3 bullets that came through. There were 5 bullets actually shot by the defendant through the patio doors. There were 5. 3 made it through all the way into apartment 3. 1 out the patio doors of apartment 3. A 4th one stuck in the stud of this wall, of this common wall, and a 5th one that went through these doors didn't make it past the floor of this, this is apartment 3, didn't make it through the apartment 4. It was very damaged bullet. It was later determined to have been fired by Detective Hankison's gun. It was found on the floor in the dining room of apartment 4, which would be right here. They mirror each other. So it didn't make it through the wall, but nevertheless was shot through the sliding glass door. So there were 5 total bullets shot by the defendant through this door. Now, as the group of detectives approached the breezeway to execute the search warrant and had lined up in a formation with Detective Mattingly and Detective Nobles, who's the detective with the ram, at the front door. You will hear that Detective James was over by this wall. Detective Cosgrove was a little bit further back. Detective Campbell was the farthest back. Lieutenant Hoover also back in this area, as was the defendant, Detective Hankison, because there's not room in that little alcove for 7 men to stand all bunched up. So Mattingly and Cosgrove, Mattingly and Nobles basically at the door. Now, once they were in position, you will hear that a gentleman came out this door, which is apartment 8, came out the door to the railing or to the top of the stairs, and you will hear from him. His name's Aaron Sarpy, who was there to pick up his daughter from the babysitter. And he was preparing, he had come up to this apartment prior to the detective's arrival. He had already come to pick up his daughter. And actually his white Sequoia was parked out in the parking lot behind. It was in a perpendicular. He had pulled up and just parked it there. He didn't pull into a parking spot to run up and get his daughter. When he came out, you will hear detectives told him to go back in. Prior to him coming out, they had begun to knock on the door of apartment 4. They had begun to announce police search warrant. When this gentleman came out, Detective Hankison in particular began to engage verbally with him, telling him to get back in, and continued to engage verbally with the gentleman. The detectives who were up at the door couldn't see Mr. Sarpy. They were too far under this deck landing. But Hankison was back here. He could very well see Mr. Sarpy and continue to engage with him to get back inside, get back. This escalated the situation. At that point, finally, Sarpy did go back in. back in the apartment. At that point is when the knocking had been going on for minutes. No response. A decision was made after the gentleman went back inside to go ahead and breach the door. There were 3 hits, or I believe at least 3, possibly 4, with the ram against the door handle side of, can't see the door here, but the door handle side is on the right of the door to apartment 4. First hit did not make the breach. Second did not. And finally, third, I believe it was the third, possibly the fourth, that actually breached the door handle side at where the lock and the handle are on the right side, so that when the door opened, it went right to left. There was no knocking the door off the hinges. The door, as you saw in the earlier photograph, Exhibit 5, which was taken after the next morning, as you see, the door is perfectly still on the hinges. And you can't see, but inside the lock here, or doorknob area is where it was breached. That caused it to open, staying on the hinges, opening up. During the time that, and this happened quickly. During the time that the breach was taking place, Detective Cosgrove, who had been behind these two who were at the door, moved up to cover Detective Nobles with the ram. He moved up in this direction to cover because the defendant was too busy engaging with Mr. Sarpy upstairs. So Cosgrove moved up to cover the guy with the ram, because the guy with the ram doesn't have any protection, has not got his gun at the ready. So Cosgrove moved up, stepped up to cover, which put him in the line of fire. As soon as the door was breached, you will hear, as it opened up, it was pitch dark inside, and a shot came out the door immediately and hit Detective Mattingly, who was on the left side, but it was attempting to step in when he was hit in the leg, in actually the femoral artery. As soon as that shot rang out and hit Detective Mattingly, he and Detective Cosgrove, who had stepped up, after Detective Nobles breached the door with the ram, he spun out immediately. He spun out and was over here. So he was not in the doorway. Mattingly and Cosgrove, who had stepped up and were in the line of fire, and both returned fire after Mattingly was shot. You will hear that the defendant, Hankison, was not in the line of fire. And go back to 31A, I think. or 19, I guess 19. Yes. Hankison had been over here engaging with Sarpy. When the shots rang out, when the shot came from inside the apartment and hit Detective Mattingly, he ran over this direction, obviously behind this railing, and started shooting in a perpendicular, geometrically perpendicular to where the shot had come from inside the apartment. So those in the doorway were shooting, and this is west. This is south here. This is south. This is west, east, north. North would be this direction. So he's shooting from a south-north direction where the detectives who had been in the line of fire and returned fire from the doorway after the door was breached, and they were met with gunfire. They returned fire west-east, obviously, in the direction of where the shooter had shot from. And you will hear the shooter was at the end of the hallway. So he ran over here into actually the sidewalk. All of his casings were found in the parking lot. 10 shots were fired by the defendant. All 10 casings were found out here in the parking lot. None, of course, over here. All the casings in this breezeway that were located by the crime scene unit were casings that had been fired by the two detectives in the doorway, Cosgrove and Mattingly. Cody Etherton and Chelsea Napper were asleep in apartment 3 back here in this bedroom when they heard the banging, the breach, the ram. And Cody jumped up, you'll hear from him, and was walking toward the front door to see what was going on. As he got to this area, a bullet whizzed close to his head that he heard, and then saw debris, drywall, dust, where that bullet had come through. Bullets. He ran, he'll tell you, he hit the ground, crawled back to the bedroom. Chelsea Napper will testify. She woke up from sleep, and she is not she's a very heavy sleeper, but woke up immediately from these bangings and froze. She froze. She couldn't move. She couldn't, yet knowing her 5-year-old son was asleep in this bedroom. So Cody ran back, crawled back to the bedroom. They then were able to go get the child. As Cody came back out, the firing had stopped, the gunfire stopped. He came back out and then noticed the shattered glass of their patio door, and all the glass you'll see laying on the carpet. And you'll also hear there was a bullet, one of the bullets likely that hit above that door, the doorway, you'll see a photo, and the bullet bounced back and landed, one of them landed in the carpet there. But one went all the way, did shatter the glass. They called 911. It was cold that night. So their door, which had been shattered, cold air was pouring in. You will hear that the radio, the defendant got on the radio after the shooting and called for patrol. You'll hear radio clips of him calling. Patrol car after patrol car came to the scene. Some of the patrol cars you will hear, some of the patrol officers went to the back of the building. And Cody Etherton was in some danger because at that point, no one knew that he was actually in a separate apartment. So there were guns pointed at him as he stood in the shattered and put his hands out this shattered glass and saw guns pointed at him from these patrol that came. So that's part of the circumstances that were created by the defendant in apartment 3. That's part of the circumstances that you will hear about. You will hear that the defendant gave a statement, and you will hear the statement to the Public Integrity Unit, which was called to investigate the scene, to process the scene, to interview all the detectives. You will hear that the defendant claimed that he saw into the doorway, the front door, and he claimed that he saw a shooter in there with an AR rifle in a combat position. And that he actually was standing here that he could see in, and that he returned fire when he saw that shooter with an AR rifle start shooting. You will learn that there was no AR rifle in apartment 4. There was one pistol, a Glock 43X 9mm, which had been used by the shooter inside, and it was found under a bed in the front bedroom. Under a bed in the front bedroom. Not the back bedroom, which was where Ms. Taylor and her boyfriend had been, but under a bed in the front bedroom, which window faces the parking lot. It's next to these doors, down just a little bit. One gun, one pistol, 9mm, and there was a casing that matched that 9mm found in the hallway, down the hallway, and there was one bullet which matched the shooter in the apartment's gun, the 9mm found under the bed. One bullet was later found out in the breezeway where Detective Mattingly had been shot. The bullet went through his leg and was found in the breezeway and was later identified as having been fired from the gun found under the bed in the apartment, the 9mm. There was never any AR long rifle. You will hear from officers who were there. You will hear from the SWAT team that came shortly after to clear the apartment. The SWAT team came to clear the apartment 4. And you will see some body-worn cameras that the SWAT team had. You will see that the defendant, you will see him in some of these body cameras that the SWAT team were wearing. Because after the shooting, the officers were assisting Mattingly to get to the hospital. He was bleeding out. But the defendant was still covering or pointing his gun at this apartment. There were patrol officers also doing that. However, once the SWAT team arrived, the other officers did not attempt to go into the apartment. The defendant did. He came to the door and attempted to go into the apartment while the SWAT team was trying to clear. You will hear from firearms examiners who tested the casings and the bullets retrieved at the scene to the gun belonging to Hankison, and as I said, they determined that all 10 of the casings found in the parking lot were fired from his. It's a Glock Model 22 .40 caliber service weapon. All 10 casings in that parking lot area were fired from his gun. You will hear from firearms instructors at Louisville Metro who will describe to you the training that takes place with officers at Louisville Metro. You will hear from an officer or a major who has knowledge of and will tell you about not only the firearms training, but the history of the training that this defendant has had in his career as a law enforcement officer. The major will describe some of the specific training courses, but you will actually have an entire transcript of the trainings that he has had since being a law enforcement officer, going all the way back to 1999, I believe, when he went to basic training. You will hear from some of the witnesses who were at the hospital following the shooting, where John Mattingly had been taken. And the defendant went to the hospital. So you will hear from some witnesses who engaged with him at the hospital. You will see photographs that were taken by the crime scene unit inside apartment 4 as they processed the scene. The body of Ms. Taylor will be in one of the photos at the end of the hallway. At the very end of the hallway, directly inside this door, looking straight ahead, is the hallway. And at the very end of the hallway, on the floor, is the body of Miss Taylor, hit by return fire of those detectives in the doorway who were returning fire after Mattingly was shot. So I ask you to pay close attention to the testimony and keep in mind, what are the circumstances here under which this defendant acted? What are the circumstances which exhibited extreme indifference to human life? Starting with the gentleman upstairs. What was his reaction to that? How did that impact everything that followed? The circumstances of this crowded apartment building, many, many people in this building, starting with Mr. Sarpy and ending with Cody, Chelsea, and 5-year-old Zayden. Thank you all.
Mr. Matthews, do you wish to present an opening
I
statement?
do, Your Honor. Thank you. May it please the court?
Yes.
Ms. Whaley, Mr. Finke, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, we finally have made it. We've been through this jury selection process. Now it's time to get to work. You all, 15, have been selected from a large group, and we've determined that you're the ones that are most suitable and qualified to sit on this jury and decide the issues at hand. As Judge Smith indicated to you, what I say in my opening statement and what Ms. Whaley just told you is not evidence. A lot of people refer to opening statements as opening arguments. In fact, that's a total misnomer. It's an opening statement. An argument is made at the close of the case after you've heard all the evidence, and we try to sum up what we think it has shown. The opening statement, as the judge indicated, is our opportunity to kind of provide you with a roadmap of where we expect the evidence to go. We've just spent, I'm not sure how long, listening to Ms. Whaley explain what she thinks the evidence will show. I could go on for another 2 hours filling in gaps that she did not present or providing you with further information. I'm not going to do that because the evidence that you're going to hear in this case is going to come from that witness stand and from any exhibits that are presented to you. You alone are going to decide what this case is all about. But just to begin with, ladies and gentlemen, the charge here is wanton endangerment in the first degree times 3. 3 counts, as Ms. Whaley just explained to you. The Commonwealth's position is, and you just heard Ms. Whaley tell you, that Brett Hankison was present at that scene and about everything he did was wrong and amounts to wanton endangerment. It adds up to wanton endangerment. The path that we are choosing is, well, first of all, the evidence is going to not be disputed too much by us with what Ms. Whaley just said. There's a lot more to fill in the gaps, but basically there's not going to be any dispute about the evidence. This is not a case of, hey, they've got the wrong guy sitting in here or somebody else did it. Brett Hankison is the one that's charged. He's the one that fired the shots that are the subject of this case. So that's not an issue. The issue is, what was the reasoning behind his firing those shots? Ms. Whaley indicates that his interaction with Mr. Sarpy up on the balcony that was up there, there was something wrong with that. She indicates that he couldn't have seen what was going on inside the door once it was breached. She doesn't know that. And you're going to hear, ladies and gentlemen, I assume from the witness, from the other, there were 7 total LMPD officers out there at Breonna Taylor's apartment to serve that search warrant. And you're going to hear from at least probably 5 of them, I think. I'm sure one is not going to testify. You're going to also hear from Brett Hankison when it's his turn. But through hearing from those officers, you're going to discover that this scene was total chaos and just unbelievable chaotic situation, and they all have about the same recollection of what occurred, but everybody's got something different, and people don't know where each other were. So Ms. Whaley telling you definitively that Mr. Hankison was out of the picture and couldn't see in that hallway when that door was breached is not accurate, and you're going to be determining the facts, but Brett Hankison's going to tell you that when that door was breached, he had a straight shot in that hallway. He saw the muzzle flash from the gun that was fired at the officers as they breached that door. His perception of it was that it was an AR-15 rifle. Ms. Whaley said there was no AR-15 rifle in that apartment. I don't think there's going to be any evidence to establish one way or another whether there was. The evidence is going to be that once that shot was fired and the officers returned fire, the search warrant that they were there to execute to begin with was never served. The shots were fired, Breonna Taylor was killed, SWAT was called in to take over the scene after Brett Hankison successfully assisted in calling the shooter out of the apartment without any harm coming to him. Once SWAT arrived on the scene, they took over and they turned it over to the Public Integrity Unit, which conducted the investigation of the shooting. That nobody ended up serving the search warrant that the police were originally there to serve. So we don't know whether there was any contraband in that apartment and what kind of contraband there may have been. I believe the evidence will show that sometime later on March the 13th, in the day after this all occurred, the family was granted access to the apartment unaccompanied, and there's nobody knows what could have happened within that apartment. But you're going to hear from FBI agent Ziegler about some shell casings that he examined besides the shell casings recovered from what the police fired. And I believe that there could be some doubt about whether or not Detective Hankison could have in fact seen an AR rifle. In any event, ladies and gentlemen, be that as it may, no matter what the evidence shows, Detective Hankison returned fire, and you have to understand, I think everybody that was out there is going to tell you that this entire incident, after the knocking and announcing had occurred, and after the breach had occurred, the entire incident lasted from anywhere from 5 to 15 seconds. We had a stopwatch and timed it exactly, but it was all instantly. Officer Mattingly was shot, he returned fire. Officer Cosgrove was next to him, he returned fire. And Brett Hankison slipped around the side, as you saw on the photograph that was up there, and he returned fire in the direction of where he had seen the original shot come from within the apartment. He was attempting to defend and save the lives of his brother officers who he thought were still caught in what they call the fatal funnel in that doorway. And what he saw was he was responding, number one, to the original shot, and he also will tell you that he saw muzzle flashes, which probably, as it turns out, were return fire from Cosgrove and Mattingly. But he was firing in the direction of that, as he was taught to do. You're taught to shoot until the threat is stopped. You're obligated under the operating procedures of the LMPD to defend yourself, your brother, sister officers, and citizens. And that's exactly what Brett Hankison was doing in this situation. And I think after you've heard all the evidence, rather than go down the path that Ms. Whaley wants you to go down and find him guilty of wanton endangerment 3 times over, you're going to go down the path that we suggest you go down and find that he was justified. His actions were reasonable and justified given the chaotic situation he was in. And we're going to hear from a number of officers, I believe, who are firearms instructors and range instructors, who are going to say that there are certain rules that you have to follow when you're discharging a weapon, whether you're a police officer or just a citizen who's out shooting. There are certain basic rules. We aren't going to dispute any of that. But the officers go through training, and I'll tell you one thing that none of these people are going to say is that they are trained under circumstances such as existed on March 13th, 2020 at Breonna Taylor's apartment. And again, as I said during voir dire, this case is not about the death of Breonna Taylor, but in fact, it's totally about that, in the sense that that's what started this whole situation. We're concerned with the 3 occupants of apartment 3 who were not injured and were not even on the radar as far as Brett Hankison was concerned. Ms. Whaley told you about the briefing that the officers attended before they went out to Springfield, and I'm going to fill in. I don't want to get into great minutia detail, but there were 2 separate briefings. There was a number of search warrants that were going to be served that night, was the intention. SWAT was part of one briefing, and the officers who went out to Springfield were part of a different briefing. Nobody in the briefing that was held with reference to Springfield ever mentioned apartment 3 or the layout of the building. These officers went in there, had no idea what they were getting into, and part of the reason for that was that the other search warrants that were going to be served that night were for places that were well known to the police and well known to contain guns and drugs. Breonna Taylor was kind of a peripheral part of this whole deal, but she was tied into it, and they had a valid search warrant to go there, but it was determined, and it was issued, as Ms. Whaley said, as a no-knock warrant. That means they can just go up and ram that door and go inside. But somewhere along the line that night, it was determined that Breonna Taylor was not a threat to anybody. They didn't think she was a threat to anybody. It was thought that she was living alone. She didn't have kids. She didn't have animals. Nobody thought there would be any danger there. And so I think that somebody dropped the ball, and there wasn't as much preparation done in the search of her place, which is what led up to the shooting of John Mattingly and ultimately to Detective Hankison firing his rounds through her apartment that went into apartment 3. All of that happened instantaneously all together. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, after you've heard all the evidence, you're going to determine that Brett Hankison was justified in what he did, and everything he did on that scene out there before, during, and after the shooting occurred was logical, was reasonable, was justified, and made total sense. So I would ask you to keep an open and clear, and pay close attention to this case and to the evidence, because that's what's going to come from that witness chair and from the exhibits, not what I've just said or not what Ms. Whaley said. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, why don't we take about a 15-minute break, and then we'll get started with the first witness. Please remember the separation admonition to not discuss the case with anyone, nor allow anyone to discuss the case with you. Don't form opinions, as you've not heard any of the evidence yet. We'll come back at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
All rise, reporting jury.
Put your notepads face down in your chair.
Anything to report from the break, ladies and gentlemen? All right, good. Ms. Whaley, are you ready to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Commonwealth calls Cody Etherton.
If you'll take a seat, please. And if you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. You can put your hand down.
Would you state the name for for the jury and speak up so we can hear you?
My name is Cody Etherton.
How old are you, Cody?
I am 29.
And do you live in Louisville?
Yes.
Did you grow up in Louisville?
Yes.
And you go to high school here?
Yes.
Which high school?
Fairdale.
Okay, and remember to speak up. Where do you work, Cody?
Currently working for a guy named Rob Hendrickson. It's a remodeling business.
And who do you live with?
Currently, I live with Chelsea Napper and my son Bryson and her son Zayden.
And you all, how long have you and Chelsea been together?
6 years. Yeah.
And so, when you all met, her son Zayden, she had her son Zayden, or had not? I guess she had.
Yes. Yes. She. We're both in recovery, so she was in the process of getting him back, and we both have over 4 years sober. So she was getting her stuff together, getting her life together, so that she could be a stable mother for him.
I see.
Yes.
So you all are both in recovery now?
Yes, ma'am.
And how long have you been sober?
I have been sober since December 23rd of 2017. So
Congratulations.
over 4 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you all been together 6 years, and you all have a son now.
Yes, ma'am.
And what's his name?
His name is Bryson Etherton.
And how old is Bryson now?
Bryson is 20 months.
Okay. So I'm going to take you back now to March of 2020. Was Chelsea pregnant with Bryson at that time?
Yes, ma'am. I believe that she was around 7 months pregnant with my son.
And where did you all live in March of 2020?
We lived in St. Anthony Gardens Apartments, 3003 Springfield Drive, Apartment 3.
Apartment 3. And how long had you lived there at March of 2020? How long had you all been there?
I think at that day we was around going on I believe 2 years, going on about 2 years.
Okay. Did you know the neighbors in the building there at 3003?
No, I did not. I've seen them a few times. Didn't really know them.
Now-
Didn't even know their names.
When I say neighbors, you all had quite a few apartments in the building.
Yes.
So you all were apartment 3, And did you know the people who lived in apartment 4? As you come out, your door be to your left.
No, I did not. I've seen them coming in and out. We've said hi. That was it. Like, I never knew their names.
And who did you think lived there as far as male, female, how many people?
I was under the impression that about 3 people lived there,
Which would be,
2 females and a male.
okay. Now, what about apartment to your right as you come out your door, apartment 2? Did you know those folks?
I don't remember her name, but I did talk to her. She was a sweet older lady. She was very friendly. We did have quite a few conversations. They was real short, but like I said, I don't even remember her name, to be honest.
Okay. Any of the other neighbors that you knew? Or,
No.
so were you all busy back at that time? You all had active lives?
Yes, ma'am. I worked a lot. Sometimes 10 hours, sometimes even more days. Worked weekends too. And like I said, we was in bed 10 o'clock, up 7 o'clock next morning, off to work. At work by 8 every single day, Monday through Friday.
Okay, I'm going to show you a exhibit. A floor plan of your apartment. Deputy Ballinger, he indicated he was next door. It's
Okay.
not, oh, yeah. It's not responding.
Okay.
Well, I think we're gonna go the old-fashioned way and use the poster. Oh, here's Deputy Bellinger.
There you go.
The professional. Okay, Cody, if you would, can we get it on both screens?
Is it on your screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. He has it on his screen here on the,
If you could, look at the floor plan on the screen and point out where you and Chelsea slept. Where's your bedroom?
Is it gonna show it on there?
I'm not sure.
I think you may have to use the pointer to the screen behind you, the laser pointer. Yeah.
Okay. So me and Chelsea slept in this back bedroom here.
Okay, and then where did Zayden sleep?
Zayden slept along this wall in his bedroom.
Is that where his bed was?
Yes, it was actually long ways against this wall.
Okay. And just go ahead and point out the front door to the apartment.
This here was the front door.
Okay. Now, on the night of March 12th, what time did you all go to bed?
I believe we was definitely in bed by 10:30.
And Zayden was in bed?
Yes, ma'am.
So what happened after that, after you went to bed?
So we were sleeping, and I got woke to what was like a loud boom, and I jumped on my feet, and she jumped out of the bed as well, and I kind of sped walked down the hallway here. And in my mind, I was thinking that for some reason I just thought that somebody was trying to come into our apartment. So my instinct was to go to the front door, of course, to protect my family. So as I made it down the end of the hall and I came out into the living room, dining room area, our kitchen table was here on this wall in the dining room, and right when I came out into the open, just debris started going past my head, my face, which I pretty much knew, because I heard the shots, pretty much knew that it was gunfire coming through the wall, because that's what I do for a living is remodeling. So when the drywall started hitting me in the face, like I already knew. So I hit the floor and rolled back into the hallway, went back into the bedroom, made her get on the ground. There was probably maybe a 30-second pause. Everything got silent after the shots. Like, I don't even remember how many shots I heard because it was just so chaotic. I remember hearing them, but I couldn't tell you how many I heard. Like, it was all at once to me. After the silent, I believe that I heard LMPD, get down on the ground, or somewhere along those lines. I heard something like, I heard LMPD announce themselves outside. Like, that's all I remember. And I remember having like a relief. I was like, okay, the police are out there. you know, it kind of relieved my mind because, like, I didn't know what to think at the time. Like, I didn't know if people were outside in the breezeway fighting, shooting at each other. I didn't know if we was getting robbed. Like, I just didn't know what was going on. And so after I heard the LMPD yelling outside, I kind of waited, paused, made her stay still, and then everything got silent again. And that's when I came back out into the hallway, out into the dining room, and I looked through the peephole, and I didn't see anything at all.
The people, point out where that is.
That was right here in the front door, and I didn't see anything when I looked through the peephole. So for some reason, I opened the door and I walked out, and I had no shirt on, red basketball shorts. I don't even think I had flip flops or anything on. I think I was barefooted. And I walked all the way out into the breezeway, and I looked left, and I seen the neighbor's door busted wide open, but it was pitch black inside. And then that's when I
That
heard.
would be apartment 4 to your left?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And that's when I heard.
Did you look in the door?
Yeah, I looked in there, but it was black as night, and I couldn't really see anything. Couldn't make up of anything. And I
See
remember.
anybody in the breezeway?
No, didn't see anything. I could see like flashing lights around the corner of the building, but straight ahead there was nobody. There was nothing.
Okay, what'd you do?
And I after I looked down the hall or into her bedroom or apartment, I heard somebody saying, I believe that was "Breathe, baby, breathe."
Breathe?
I think it was "Breathe, baby, breathe." That's what I remember hearing. And that's when I knew. I was like, this is serious. Like, so I kept walking out towards the edge of the steps at the end of the breezeway just to look out into the parking lot to see what was going on. That's when some officers seen me, and they ordered me to get back into the apartment immediately. So I did. I turned around, went back inside, shut the door, locked it. And then I remember hearing from our back patio screen door, I remember hearing all the glass just shuddering, falling. So I walked to it, and I pulled the sliding blinds open just to look at it. And when I did, there was, I'm not sure if it was police or SWAT or what, but they were, I remember seeing a dog. I remember seeing a dog to my left, a canine. And then I seen, I know I had flashlights on me, but I believe I seen red dots. And, you know.
Out the back of the patio?
Out the back of the patio. And they seen me, and I heard them say, white male, red basketball shorts, no shirt, round back. I remember hearing it. You could hear it on the radio. And they instructed me to put my hands out the door through the falling glass. They said, put your hands out the window. That's what they said. And I was like, to me, that was not a good idea, for one, because there's falling glass. So I immediately shut the blinds back and jarred it back down into the hallway. And I remember thinking, I was like, they're getting ready to stick this dog in here. And I have a dog. I had a dog as well. And I remember thinking, like, if his dog gets in here, you know, he's going to harm us.
Did they have guns
Yes.
pointed at where?
They were pointed all towards the door. Like, I believe that I even had, you know, I remember seeing red dots going across, like, towards, like, I was at the doorway. And I remember seeing red dots, like, crossing me, you know, where I was standing, and they definitely had lights shined on me.
And told you to put your hands out the broken glass,
Yes, ma'am.
but you didn't.
No, I did not. I immediately ran back down into the hallway, and
Go ahead and point out where you ran back.
I ran back down into the hallway, and Chelsea was standing right here. She may have been sitting down right there, but I remember she got up and stood up, and I said, "Get 911," or she might have even had 911 on the phone, and I made her call them back. I believe that's what happened. She was already on the phone with 911, and then she hung up, and I said, "Call them back and tell them that whatever's going on, this is the wrong apartment." Like, cause I could put two and two together. Like, I was like, of course I seen the busted door. So I knew that I immediately put two and two together. I was like, they think my back door is her back door. That's what I thought. And which to me is just very unorganized. Like to me, a professional, a well-trained officer, they should have had the floor plans. They should have had the blueprints. Like, they didn't even know whose back door that was. They didn't even know who lived there. So to me, that kind of upset me. It was just reckless to me. And so she got them back on the phone, and I told them to tell them that this is not the same apartment, whatever's going on. They're holding me at gunpoint, telling me to put my hands out the window, blah, blah, blah. And then they said, it's fine, sit still. We'll get. They said they'll sort it out or whatever, and we'll send an officer over there. So she hung up the phone, and I think we sat there, honestly. She hung up the phone, and at one point, not too long after that, I ended up going back to the front door, and looking through the peephole again, and that's when I watched them talk a male with his hands up, walking backwards towards the end of the breezeway. They was instructing him out of the apartment 4. Made him walk backwards with his hands up, and then I watched him. I literally watched him get down on his knees at the end of the steps and watched him arrest him through the peephole.
Through the peephole.
Yes, ma'am. And so after that, we sat there an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours before anybody even came and checked on us. It was cold that night. Like I said, our patio screen door, a glass door, sliding door was shattered. We was freezing. Luckily, her son at the time did not wake up. He did wake up later on, early the next morning, and I remember, I think she told him that a storm came or something. But we sat there for a while, and then in my mind I was like, well, I'm gonna try to go back to sleep and get some rest. So I'm gonna go to work. Like, for some reason I was gonna go to work that next morning. They wouldn't let me out of the apartment to even go to work, because I tried, and they said, no, you cannot leave the apartment. This is a crime scene.
They come into the apartment and take photographs and collect bullets.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, if you would look at the photograph on the screen, which is Exhibit 94, and take your pointer and explain what that shows.
So this shot here, I believe, is the one that I was inches away from hitting me, because I was eye level with this hole here. And like I said, I was literally standing in front of the table at the end of the hallway when this happened, and then bullets came through the wall. One more, like I literally, like 1 or 2 more inches and I would have been shot. Which kind of upsets me, because I think about it all the time, and I'm like, my son would have never even got to meet me. I would have never even got to meet my son. I mean, any of them bullets could have went anywhere, you know.
There's another bullet in the clock, or bullet hole.
Yes, there's another one here, and then there's one down here above the chair rail.
Going to exhibit 95. Next photo. There, and then the other bullet hole in the clock.
Yes.
Go on to 96. And then, is that the third bullet hole?
Yes, ma'am. This one, I believe, bounced up on the table.
Okay. This next photo, again, of the dining room table. And I think the next one, 98. Is that the bullet that landed on, came through that drywall there, the chair rail, I guess, and hit the table?
Yes, ma'am.
Back on to. Now, this photo, exhibit 100, tell us what this is showing.
So this here is the end of the hallway. This is where her son Zayden was sleeping along this wall. This is where his bed is.
The other side of the wall.
It's on the other side of the wall. So, you know, I literally measured it. It was like 7 more feet to the right, and that bullet would have entered his room.
And you came down that hall when you heard the banging.
Yes, I came down the hall. Right, I was standing right here when I dropped to the ground.
After the debris came through the wall.
Yes, ma'am.
There, exhibit 101 here, what does this show?
This is showing our patio sliding glass door.
Now,
And up here is another bullet. I believe this bullet bounced back out off the brick on the other side and landed somewhere on the ground here.
and we'll go on to the next photo. 102. Is this your patio door?
Yes, ma'am.
And at the bottom of that photo, is that the shattered glass we see on the carpet?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, this photo is a close-up of what you were explaining, the bullet at the top there, bullet defect. So it didn't actually go through the wall. It was found on the carpet below. We'll see in the next photo, I think. But that, can you go back to 103? The blind there, the hole in the blind, that's a bullet hole, that the one that actually went through and shattered.
Yes, ma'am. I believe so.
Now, this is a close-up of that, some of that shattered glass right below the sliding door, and that's a bullet there. You want to point that out? Now, when did you all actually, were you actually able to leave the apartment, and how did that happen? That next day, which would have been the March 13th.
I'm not sure the exact time. It was hours. It was several hours that we remained in the apartment. Like I said, I don't recall the exact time like that we was able to leave.
And when you left, how did you leave? Did you go out the front door, or?
They told us we could go out back.
Through the broken door?
Through the broken door. They told us we could go around back and leave that way, but like I said, like our vehicles were right in the middle, so there was no leaving. Chelsea at one point went to look for maintenance at the office with her son, to see about somebody at least boarding it up or replacing the door, because like I said, it was cold. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how many hours we remained
Okay.
in there, but it was several hours.
At some point, you got permission that you could go out the front?
Yes. At one point, they did tell us that it was clear and it was okay to exit out the front. And I remember walking out there and looking at my work truck, and I remember seeing blood on the side of my work truck, and I was like, and I knew what it was. I knew what it was from. But I don't even think we left that day after that. Like, we were still trying to put it all together in our heads, like really what just happened.
Now, these photos that you've been describing, are they a fair and accurate representation of how your apartment looked that night?
Yes, they are.
Your Commonwealth would move to admit. It was 94 through 108.
94, and then,
95, 96.
did you show all of those?
Actually, 94 through 105. This is 105 here, the last photo that was shown.
All right, I thought maybe I'm wrong, I thought we skipped from 94, and then the next exhibit that you showed was 100.
So 95.
Okay.
We could,
Any objection?
Judge, I don't have any objection. I'm not sure that 94 through 105 were all shown, but I assume they're all about the same.
94 through 105 were shown. We could go back through them.
Why don't we? Why don't we just go through them quickly?
Okay.
Make
So
sure we
this
have
is
them all.
94. Look at the photo. You talked about the clock, the table. 95, close-up of the clock. 96, showing the defect in the wall. 97, table, and can you see the bullet on the table there? Okay, thank you. 98. Table. 99. Did you point out the close-up of the bullet? Then 100. The hallway that you came down. 101. The further back photo of the sliding doors with the blinds. 102. 102. Sliding door. 103. The close-up of the blinds showing the two defects, bullet defects. 104. Showing the glass that had shattered out of the sliding door. And 105, the close-up of the bullet.
All right, those will all be admitted into evidence.
And I have no further questions. Thank you, Cody.
All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Etherton, on March the 20th, March the 12th, 2020, you indicated you went to bed about 10:30, correct?
Yes.
Had you been outside before you went to bed?
I don't know if I took the trash out or not, but that would be the only reason, or to go to my truck.
You remember observing any unusual activity in the parking lot?
do not.
Okay. So you went to bed, you and Chelsea were asleep, Zayden was asleep, and the next thing you know, you were awakened to a loud, I think you said a boom, correct?
Yes.
Do you know what that boom was?
Yeah, I figured it out after the fact. It was what I believe what is called a ram.
Okay, it was not gunshots, correct?
No.
Had you heard any voices before you heard the loud boom?
No, I was asleep.
When you heard the boom, that woke you up, correct?
I believe that I believe I was working. Woke up on either the side. I'm not even sure how many times that door was rammed. If it was rammed 2 or 3 times, but I believe like I started coming out of my sleep on the first boom, and then it was like boom again, and then that's when I was. I believe that's what I remember. It was.
When you were awakened and hearing the boom, were you hearing any voices?
No.
Not at all? Is that because there weren't any voices, or because you just had been awakened and weren't conscious of them?
No, I heard no voice until after the gunfire entered through our wall.
So you hadn't heard anything up to that point, correct?
No.
What was the gunfire? How did that happen?
Like I said, I don't know if it's something that my brain just shut down on, but like I don't even actually remember and hearing like each and every gunfire that was let off, because like after the fact it was all over the news and stuff. I was like, wow, that many shots were made, but I don't even remember hearing that many shots. Like, I don't know.
We want to know what you remember from that night, not what you heard on the news, okay?
Yeah.
Were these gunshots that you heard, how long did that last, if you can estimate?
To me, I mean, it was just like I know I remember hearing like 2 of them. I know that for a fact. Like I don't know. Like I said, I can't even remember hearing them, hearing every single gunshot. Like I just remember hitting the floor, being scared, and rolling back into the hallway.
Were the gunshots something that seemed to have happened all at the same instant?
Like I said, I remember hearing a couple of them, but yeah, I mean, it seems like it just all went douche, douche.
Okay, and you and Chelsea and Zayden were not hurt, or not injured, right, or struck by anything?
No, I was struck by drywall debris,
Okay.
but no.
But you were able to get back to the back bedroom?
Yes.
And during the course of going to the back bedroom, did you hear any voices from outside?
Yes, like I said before, when I ran back into the back bedroom and told her to get down on the ground because I didn't know what was going on, that's when I believe I remember hearing LMPD get on the ground or something like that, and then everything got silent.
Was that directed toward you or somewhere else?
I could hear it outside, so it was outside.
I mean, they weren't talking to you, as far as you know?
Not at that point, no.
Okay. Did you said at one point you went and peeked out the peephole, correct?
Yes.
Where was that in this sequence of events?
That was, I looked out the peephole 2 different times. The first time was after everything got quiet again, after I heard LMPD get down on the ground, everything got quiet again.
That was after the shots, correct, that first time?
Yes.
And when you looked out the peephole, what, if anything, did you see?
Seen nothing.
No police?
I seen our Christmas tree that we had set out to, we was gonna take it to the dumpster. We had an old Christmas tree. We bought a new one, so it was scattered all. It was one of those fake trees, and it was scattered all over the place. I remember seeing that through the peephole.
Okay, was your range of vision kind of narrow through that peephole? Or could you
I
see
mean,
pretty much of that breezeway?
No, I could see, I could see the whole, I could see my truck all the way out in the parking lot, in front of my truck.
Okay, you didn't see any police officers or anybody around, is that correct?
Not at that moment.
Could you tell that the door to apartment 4 had been breached or opened?
I believe I did see it. I seen part of the door, like you could see this side of the door jam. But that wasn't like that didn't that didn't go through my mind. Like I don't remember telling myself like her door is open at that point. It wasn't until I actually opened the door and took a step out that I was like, I seen her door busted wide open.
Okay, well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. You stepped out into that little breezeway, correct? Or vestibule, whatever we're gonna call it?
Yes.
And there was nobody around?
No, not at that moment.
And nobody said anything to you?
Not at that moment.
There was
No.
no gunfire?
Not at that moment.
So what'd you do, close the door and go back inside?
No, like I said before, I started hearing a male's voice saying, "Breathe, baby, breathe." And I could see flashing lights around the corner of the complex, and that's when I walked out further to the edge of the breezeway. And then that's when officers, or I don't know if it was SWAT officers, I don't know who even said it, but they said, "Get that F back into the apartment." And I immediately turned back and went into the apartment because
Where were those officers who said that?
I don't even remember. I just heard it. Like I don't even remember where they were standing. I believe they was off. I know they was off to the right, but I mean, I don't know exactly what car or where they were standing by.
And do you know where the "breathe, baby, breathe" was coming from?
Yeah, I do now. Yes.
Well, I mean, back then, did you know?
I mean, I like to think of myself as a pretty smart guy. I was figuring it out as I was experiencing it.
Well, you used the term, it was very chaotic, right?
Absolutely.
So it's very understandable why you can't recall precisely what happened. When you say it was very chaotic, what do you mean by that?
I'm talking about the whole thing was chaotic. From the time that I got woke up to a loud boom, gunfire coming through my wall, nearly killing me, could have struck my girlfriend. It was chaos. It was chaos.
Can you estimate how long that lasted? Or was it minutes, seconds?
I mean, yeah, I'm sure it was seconds. It's gunfire.
You at some point, then you said you were stuck in the apartment for some period of time?
Yes.
And I think you said it was an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. You don't really know, right?
Yeah, it was around an hour and a half, 2 hours.
And you never ventured out again?
No, I never stepped foot back out of the apartment until it was all over.
Okay, was the incident with putting your hands out or being told to put your hands out the shattered sliding glass door, was that part of the initial chaotic part of it that you've talked about?
Yes, that was after I came back in. The first time I looked through the peephole, and then when they told me to come back in, I went back in, and then that's when I went to check our sliding glass door out, and then that's when that happened. Is when I pulled the blinds back. They were all standing out back with their.
Were those uniformed police officers, could you tell?
I have no idea. It was black. All I seen was lights, and I remember seeing a dog to my left.
Okay, and so then you went back in, I think you described how Chelsea was on the phone with 911 and hung up, and you told her to call back again and tell them, hey, you got the wrong guy, right? Or
Yes.
this is the wrong apartment.
Yes.
We're different. Okay. At some point, do you remember, well, at some point, somebody from LMPD contacted you, correct?
Yes.
And when was that?
Like I said, it was probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Do you remember who that was?
I don't know him by his name. It was a male officer. don't know him by his name. He came in. We signed a paper for them to collect evidence.
Does the name Sergeant Luke Fan mean anything to you?
That's it.
Okay. Was he with somebody else or by himself? Do you remember?
I think there was another person.
And they had you sign a piece of paper that allowed them to come in and search your apartment, basically?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. Do you remember telling him that you heard officers knocking and announcing?
No, I never heard an officer knock or announce.
You didn't tell Sergeant Luke Fan that?
Absolutely not.
Okay. You recall telling him that you went to the door and realized they weren't knocking for you? They weren't knocking on your door?
I didn't speak to that officer at all. Like, I didn't tell him about anything. It was,
Okay.
I remember my girlfriend asking him, was this LMPD that did this? And one of them responded, I think they said we're not sure, or something along those lines.
Okay. You don't know Brett Hankison, is that correct?
No,
Do you recall seeing him at all that night?
no, I didn't see any officers besides the ones that came in to collect the evidence, like actual face-to-face, you know.
That would have been after the event, correct?
When they collect the evidence?
Yes.
Yes.
Was that the next morning?
That was considered in the morning. We were still in that morning.
Was it, when they came in, was it light outside?
I believe so.
Did you see anybody coming and going from the apartment next door to you, apartment 4?
No, I didn't.
When was the last time you saw any police officers around 3003 Springfield Drive?
I'm not sure what you're asking. What do you mean, what was the last time?
I'm sorry, that was a bad question. What time, March 13th, about 1 o'clock in the morning or so is when this all happened, correct? And then you were confined, I think you said, to your apartment. You said you never left for some period of time. But you did say Chelsea left to go to the management office, correct? Do you remember when she did that?
Like I said before, I wasn't actually looking at the time. It was daylight outside, so it was
daylight outside.
It was, you know, it was, could have been 10 a.m., 11 a.m. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Do you remember, were there still police officers around the building?
Yeah, I believe there was a few officers. Yes, there was.
Remember crime scene, that yellow tape up and around?
I believe that at one point, I know Chelsea seen, I know she remembers looking, because when it started getting daylight, you could actually see, and when she left to go to the management part, to get management, at that point you could see into the apartment, and we remember seeing, we both actually seen it. There was, I believe, a white blanket, which we knew at that time was a body. There was a white blanket in the hallway over a body.
Okay.
And you could see the blood on the very end of the hallway.
Okay, so when did you finally leave your apartment?
I'm not, like I said before, I'm not 100% sure if I ever even actually left the property if I stayed on property the rest of that day or not. Like I said, I don't remember if we went and got something to eat later that night. I don't even remember. All I remember is that morning.
Okay. You didn't go to work that day, correct?
No, I did not.
And that was because your cars were blocked in, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Etherton, you and Chelsea have filed a lawsuit against Louisville Metropolitan, or the city of Louisville and Brett Hankison, correct? And a bunch of other police officers as a result of this?
Yes, I believe that is, yes, yeah.
And is it correct that you're seeking $12,001 in damages?
Absolutely not. We have not spoken of any numbers.
Okay. Have you ever seen the lawsuit that was filed on your behalf?
I've
Read
seen
it?
it.
I'm going to ask that this be marked as Defendant's Exhibit Number 1, and I would like to approach the witness and
That's
show
fine.
it to him. Mr. Etherton, this has been marked as Defendant's Exhibit Number 1. Do you recognize the caption on that? Is that your name there?
Yeah, that's my name. Yes, sir.
And can you tell us who that says it's against?
Versus Louisville, Jefferson County, Metro Government.
Here.
Police, Louisville Metro Police Department, and Detective Brett Hankison.
Okay, and how about down through there? You don't have to read all those names, but how many different people have you sued here, if you can count those?
Looks like to be 9.
And I'm going to turn here to the page 36 of this document and ask you if you can read paragraph D. Just read the part that's marked.
Enter judgment on behalf of plaintiffs against defendant for reasonable actual damages in the amount of $12 million to compensate them for the violation of their First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Eighth Amendment, 14th Amendment.
That's good enough. Actually, it says $12,001, correct?
It does.
And how about read paragraph H there?
For punitive damages under state law in the amount of $12,001.
Thank you.
Okay.
So you were not aware that this lawsuit was filed?
No, I'm fully aware that we have a lawsuit in place, but like I said, we haven't discussed any numbers between me and my lawyer.
And that hasn't influenced your testimony here today, is that correct?
What,
The fact that you're trying to get some money out of this?
of course we want to be compensated, but like I said, me and Chelsea have never even mentioned the amount, $12 million. It's never even.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
Anything on, are you asking that be admitted
I
into
am
evidence?
going to ask that this be admitted, Judge.
Any objection?
No, no.
All right, then it will be so admitted. Any questions on redirect?
Cody, your lawyer whose name is there, Jeffrey Sexton. Did you have anything to do with the putting together of this complaint?
No.
Your lawyer did all this,
Yes.
correct? Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Matthews?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you may step down. Thank you. Counsel, would you approach for just a moment, please?
Did you have that?
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take lunch today. I don't want you to think that we're not. We're going to put one more witness on, probably only do part of that witness's testimony, and then we will break for lunch. All right, Ms. Whaley, if you'll call your next witness.
Sergeant Kyle Meany.
What's the last name?
Meany. M-A-I-N.
You could go ahead and take a seat, please. If you'd raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. If you're comfortable taking your mask off while you testify, you may. You're not required to.
Okay, thank you.
State your name, please,
Kyle Meany.
and how are you employed?
I'm employed with the Louisville Metro Police Department.
What is your position?
I'm currently a sergeant.
And how long have you been with the department?
I've been with the department for 8 years.
In March 2020, what was your position with Louisville Metro?
March 2020, I was working within the Criminal Interdiction Division and a unit called Place-Based Investigations.
And what was the purpose of that unit?
So Place-Based Investigations was essentially based upon crime mapping that the Crime Information Center puts together, which is basically the intelligence side of our police department. They put that information together based upon calls for service related to violent crime and more or less try to identify hotspots within the city of Louisville.
Now, at that time, had your unit been investigating a group of individuals in the drug trafficking business?
That's correct.
And was one of those individuals Jamarcus Glover?
Yes, ma'am.
And was, as part of that investigation, were a number of search warrants obtained for different addresses?
That's correct.
Was one of those addresses 3003 Springfield Drive?
Yes, ma'am.
And was a search warrant obtained, an affidavit provided and a search warrant obtained for 3003 Springfield Drive, apartment 4?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And whose apartment was that?
That was the apartment of Miss Breonna Taylor.
Now, to show you what is marked as Commonwealth's Exhibit 124. Ask you to examine that document. Is that the affidavit that was attached to the search warrant for apartment 4?
Yes, ma'am.
And is the affidavit designated as request for a no-knock warrant?
That is correct.
And now I want to hand you Commonwealth's Exhibit 125 and ask if you identify this document.
Certainly can. That's the physical search warrant
That is the search
related
warrant.
to the affidavit. Yes,
Related
ma'am.
to the affidavit that was signed by the judge.
Yes,
Judge's
ma'am.
signature is on that warrant.
Yes, ma'am.
Had there been, prior to obtaining of this warrant, surveillance done on the apartment that's the subject of the warrant?
That is correct. There had been.
And during this process of surveillance conducted on the apartment, were there photographs obtained of Jamarcus Glover at that building?
There were. That's correct.
Now I'm going to hand you what are marked Commonwealth Exhibit 126 and Commonwealth Exhibit 127. And ask you what is contained in first Exhibit 126.
That is a photo of Mr. Glover walking to the vehicle that he was associated with a, appears to be a box in his hand. And then the second photo is him getting into the vehicle with that box.
And in front of what building?
That's in front of the apartment at Springfield, 3003.
And you are familiar with Jamarcus Glover?
Yes, ma'am, I
And that
am.
is him in the photo?
That is him in the photo.
And he has a box in his hand?
Yes, ma'am,
And that getting into a vehicle?
correct.
Okay, we would move to admit exhibits 124, 125, 126, and 127.
No objection.
All right, they'll be so admitted.
Now, on March 12th, 2020, was there a briefing done prior to the plan to execute this search warrant that you just described on apartment 4, 3003 Springfield?
That's correct. There was a briefing done at the CID office.
And what's the CID office?
So it's just our office where basically we had our, desks, everybody's, all the units were there. That's more or less where any office work was completed that needed to be done.
And who led that briefing at the CID office?
So it was Wes Barton who led that briefing, and I believe Detective Goodlett kind of assisted him with it.
And as part of that briefing, was there a whiteboard with the various addresses that were subject of the search warrants?
That's correct.
I hand you what's marked Exhibit 128.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the whiteboard, is that a photograph of the whiteboard from the briefing?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And on that whiteboard, one of the addresses listed, 3003 Springfield. Is there a list of detectives or officers beneath that address that had been designated to serve that search warrant.
That's correct, there is.
And above that address are there words written, knock and announce?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And how many officers are listed below that were designated to execute that search warrant?
Total of 8.
Okay. And is one of those officers Brett Hankison?
It is.
Who are the other officers listed?
So it's listed Nobles, Dorr, James, King, and Cosgrove. Now, if I might add, we had multiple things, other units had multiple things going on that evening. So those positions were kind of dynamically changed. Lieutenant Hoover ended up out there. Josh Dorr was not out there. And Colin King, who's listed on here, was no longer out there as well.
And what about Sergeant Mattingly?
He was still at that location.
So he was there?
Yes, ma'am.
And what about Detective Campbell?
Detective Campbell was there, that's correct.
And you said Lieutenant Hoover,
Lieutenant Hoover.
Detective Nobles?
Detective Nobles, Detective Cosgrove, and Detective Hankison.
Okay, so 7 altogether.
Yes, ma'am.
Move to admit Exhibit 128.
No objection.
It'll be so admitted.
Now, you were not involved with the serving of that search warrant.
No, ma'am, I was not.
You are the sergeant over that PBI unit.
Correct.
Not every one of those 7 detectives who actually served the warrant were in the PBI unit, as you said.
Correct.
All of the detectives, however, that served the warrant were experienced detectives,
Yes, ma'am.
and it served multiple warrants.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I believe that's all the questions for Sergeant Meany. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead then and take our lunch break. It's 12:15, and if you will come back at 1:15, and please remember the separation admonition. Have a nice lunch. I'll see you back at 1:15.
All rise for the recording jury.
All right. As I said, we're going to go ahead and take a break until 1:15. Because you are still on the witness stand, please do not discuss your testimony with anyone. Okay, thank you. Counsel, could you approach for just a moment? I just want to talk to you a minute about exhibits. So what I would prefer is that nothing be shown on the screen until something is actually admitted into evidence, because unless you all already have an agreement that everything's coming in or there's not going to be any objections, if that's the case, that's fine. But if there's anything that's questionable, I don't want it up on the screen where the jury's looking at it only to be told, yeah, you're going to have to disregard what you just saw.
We did send every single one of these photos to defense, and as numbered.
Okay, I just don't know if there's any objections to any of them, so.
There's just one with the Brianna's body, right? Yeah. There won't be any objections.
Okay, and then you all put the complaint up before we had that, and I didn't know if that was already agreed to or
I
not.
had no idea.
Yeah, so let's don't do that until it's already been admitted, and then we can show it to the jury.
Understood, and apologies for that, by the way.
Okay,
Not intentional.
Nice.
all right, thank you all.
So, these are the ones that were admitted, so.
You can just keep them right here, or you can put them down there if you plan to still use them with other witnesses.